Protests have been ongoing for 3 months after the black man George Floyd was brutally killed by police. In Rochester, New York, nearly 1,000 demonstrators marched downtown to protest the death of black man Daniel Prude in police custody. In Washington, D.C., protests have been spurred by another police shooting. Toby Muse has the details.
Washington, D.C. has been the site of a number of protests since the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement earlier this year. But protests have taken on an added energy in recent days following the shooting of an 18-year-old black man by police. Police say they were called to a neighborhood on reports of a young man with a gun. Turning up, a police officer gave chase to the young man who was holding a gun and ended up shooting and killing him. Friday night in Rochester, New York saw a large protest going through the city. While it was largely peaceful, there were a number of cases of vandalism and setting fire to structures. Social media showed videos of protesters barging into a restaurant and the diners fleeing ahead of them. The police say 11 people were arrested, and according to the police, 3 police officers were injured in the clashes. The protesters there were marching in the memory of a black man who died in March of this year. As he was being arrested by the police placed a hood over his head. He died a few days later. Portland, Oregon Friday night saw its 100th consecutive night of protest. In clashes with the police, 27 people were arrested. Louisville, Kentucky saw one of the largest protests Saturday. This was also the weekend of the Kentucky Derby, America's most important horse race. The horse race usually runs in May, but had been postponed due to the coronavirus crisis. Protesters there marched for Breonna Taylor, who was killed by police in her own apartment after a so-called no-knock raid. Protesters demand the police officers involved in the operation face charges for this killing. Authorities are continuing to investigate the case. Louisville was also the scene of a counter-protest. Heavily armed men turned up, many of whom wearing military-style dress. There were a few confrontations between the two sides, but it didn't escalate any further. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN, Washington, D.C.